Okay, so what if the secret to a well-run family isn't some new modern technique, but a model that's actually thousands of years old? Well, today we're diving into a text that puts forward a really powerful and, yeah, maybe for some, a controversial idea: the father as king. So let's get into it and break down what that actually means.
So here's our game plan. To really get our heads around this idea, we're going to look at 5 key parts from the source material. First, we'll tackle that core concept, the father as king. Then we'll see how the home gets compared to a church. After that, we'll look at Abraham as the biblical role model. Then unpack this idea of a heavenly pattern, and finally, bring it all home, literally, to see how it applies to discipline.
All right, let's jump right into the big one: the father as the king of his home. What does that phrase even mean? And, according to this text, where does this whole idea come from in the first place? Now, we're not just talking about a fancy title here. This is about a very specific job with some really clear responsibilities. So what does it actually mean to be a king inside your own family?
Okay, so the source breaks a father's role down into 3 main functions. You've got priest, prophet, and king. Now, the first 2 are all about spiritual representation, talking to God for the family and talking to the family for God. But it's that third one, the role of king, the one who governs on behalf of God. That's really the heart of this entire model.
So you might be thinking, where does this idea of ruling even come from? Well, the text points us to a specific Greek word that often gets translated as just manage. But if you look at the literal meaning, it's to stand at the head of. And from there, the interpretation is that it implies something much more active: ruling, protecting, and yes, even controlling.
And this verse right here from 1 Timothy, this is presented as the real cornerstone of the whole argument. It creates this direct link, right? It says a man's ability to lead his family is directly connected to how fit he is to lead the church. It basically suggests that the home is the ultimate proving ground for leadership. And this whole idea of the home being a training ground, well, it gets taken even further. The source argues that the family isn't just practice for the church, it's supposed to be a direct reflection of it.
And here it is, the central metaphor that holds this whole thing together: the church in miniature. The family is viewed as this complete, self-contained spiritual unit, like a microcosm of the bigger church community.
This chart does a great job of laying out the parallels that the source draws. You can see it right there. The father is the pastor, the wife is a deacon or helper, and the children are the congregation. What this does is create a really clear hierarchical structure inside the family that's meant to mirror the structure of a church.
Now, to make this model feel less abstract and more real, the source points to one of the most famous figures in the Old Testament, Abraham. He's held up as the ultimate example, the archetype of this father-king role.
The importance of fatherhood is literally baked right into Abraham's name. He goes from Abram, which means exalted father, to Abraham, father of a multitude. His entire identity, as it's presented here, is tied up in his role as a patriarch.
So what was it about Abraham that made him the one? Well, this verse suggests it all came down to one thing. God knew he could be trusted to command his household to follow the right path. It's framed as this incredibly powerful statement about the need for active, directive leadership from a dad.
And let's be really clear here. The source makes a big point that command is not a soft suggestion. It's interpreted as a strong, almost military-style term that puts the full responsibility for order and discipline right on the father's shoulders. And this brings us to a really crucial idea. According to this text, this whole model of fatherhood isn't just some human-made set of rules. It's meant to be a reflection of a divine relationship. The family is supposed to mirror a heavenly pattern of authority and obedience. To show us this heavenly pattern, the source goes straight to the words of Jesus. Here, in the Gospel of John, he makes it crystal clear that his actions, even the ultimate sacrifice of his life, are a direct fulfillment of a command he got from his Father. And this theme of obedience just keeps getting reinforced. Jesus' words, his authority, it's all presented as coming directly from the Father's command. This sets up a really clear model of a relationship that's based on perfect submission. And think about this. Even in his final moments, right before its arrest, Jesus' focus is on obedience. This moment is presented as the ultimate test of his relationship with the Father. So the big question is, how does this heavenly pattern translate to the real world of family life?
So here it is, the divine blueprint in a nutshell. The Father commands and the Son obeys. And this is the exact model that the source argues should be copied in every family, with the father taking on that role of the commander.
Okay, so how does this grand heavenly pattern actually play out in the messy day-to-day reality of raising a family? Let's get practical and look at how this model is applied, especially when it comes to the tricky subject of discipline.
To show just how heavy this responsibility is, the source shares the story of a pastor, Louis Petrus. This man was apparently willing to resign from his own church because his sons were disobedient. It's held up as the ultimate example of a father's accountability.
The source then gets personal. The author shares a story where his teenage daughter, Jessica, asks for permission to do something he thinks is a bad idea. His response is simple, direct, and leaves no room for debate. No. It's a textbook example of a father setting a very firm boundary. Now, how the author interprets this moment is absolutely key. He says he doesn't see anger or rebellion in his daughter's eyes. He sees relief. The argument being made is that firm boundaries, instead of causing conflict, can actually make kids feel safe and secure.
And this all leads to a final, crucial point from the text. The ultimate way to measure if a family is well-ordered, it argues, isn't about outward displays of faith or anything like that. It's about simple, direct obedience. This verse is presented as the final justification for this kind of top-down family structure.
So, there you have it. We've just walked through a model of fatherhood that's incredibly old and, let's be honest, for many people today, pretty controversial. It's a vision of the family as a tiny kingdom, with the father as its ruling head. And the ultimate question the source leaves us with isn't so much whether this model's right or wrong, but what does it really mean to lead, to follow, and to build a family in a world that never stops changing?